Coming up today on the Triangle and Two podcast, we got three topics for you. One, what's going on with the rosters here for Triangle basketball teams? UNC still waiting for a decision from Caleb Love. Duke has a player returning. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we're going to look at the Final Four, what we should expect, who's going to win it all, hint, hint, UConn. And then we'll wrap up with the NFL draft because we are 1 month, as we record today on a Monday, we are 1 month exactly from the start of the NFL draft. The Panthers are still on the clock. Mark Bergin, Luis Fernandez. Mark, let's get started with the college basketball situation here in the Triangle. We have some news coming into Monday today.
Yes, Tyrese Proctor is coming back to Duke, Lewis. A huge get for Duke considering they have a loaded recruiting class coming in 2023, but the only point guard, Caleb Foster, a five-star recruit coming in. So you keep that continuity at the guard position because if Jeremy Roach decides, hey, I want to go to the league, you at least have options available at the point guard position. Now, Caleb Love as well, Lewis, I can't help but wonder. He's got a decision to make at UNC. Armando Bacot's back. RJ Davis is back. I feel like we're going to have a decision by the time this very podcast releases. I hope I'm not jinxing us, but that's just the feeling I get.
No, I mean, that's just kind of what I feel like this whole week is going to be about, whether it be Duke, UNC State. Like, I think people are just going to have to start making decisions soon. Last year was a little bit different because Duke and UNC were both in the Final Four. So, it took a little bit longer to get some of these decisions made. But this feels like right around the time that all of that will start coming through. I'm really curious to see what Caleb Love ends up doing. And ultimately, I think it may be time for him to just kind of, I don't know if he wants to enter the transfer portal or if he wants to go pro. But that's just, when you talk with different people, it just kind of seems like what everyone is leaning. And the last person we're waiting to hear from would be Caleb Love. The impact of that on the team would be interesting. I mean, obviously he's averaging 16.7 points last year, but he was shooting 38% from the field, less than 30% from three. You lose offense. What does that do to spacing? What does that do with everything else? So that's going to be the big thing for UNC. Once Caleb Love officially announces his decision, then, okay, where do you go from there? Then you start looking at the transfers and trying to bring people in.
Yeah, and just to give people a little bit of a timeline of what to expect. So the transfer portal opened on March the 13th. It closes on May the 11th. It allows players the ability to transfer. Now, they can declare for the draft, but so long as they don't hire an agent, Lewis, you can declare for the draft, which is on April the 23rd, but you can the deadline to declare is April the 23rd. You have your college eligibility until May 31st. So you can say, hey, I want to test the draft waters, but then decide to come back. That was a rule that changed a few years back, Lewis. So
I love that.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah, so me too. Because if a player isn't quite ready, and if it says, oh, well, he's going to be a second rounder, he might go undrafted, he can go back to school and maintain his eligibility. So really, anytime between now and those dates, Lewis, we've got to of what happens with Caleb Love. From the Duke standpoint, too, really the two big question marks that you have for next season. Is Derek Lively going to come back? I'd imagine he'd go pro, but then Kyle Filipowski as well, the big guy with some touch. We love his offensive ability. Does he decide, hey, I want to run it back for a sophomore year again as well? Those are really the two question marks when it comes to the Duke standpoint.
Exactly. I like the Tyrese Proctor decision coming back. I think that's really good for him personally. Mm-hmm. I thought you saw Proctor catch on in the last few months of the season, like really starting to turn up his ability as they kind of made that switch to having him more serve as a point guard role versus Jeremy Roach. But I think that is ultimately going to be what's best for him. I could see him, working his way up to being higher in the draft, maybe, a late lottery pick if possible. He's got the length, he's got the size. Continue to work on his offensive game. I think that would go a long way. And I think Duke is the most dangerous, just historically, when you look at them, when they have an older point guard, when they have that veteran presence to complement, some of these young five-star players that they have coming in. So that's huge for Duke to get Tyrese Proctor back for sure. And one thing too, in all of this, I don't want to pass up this too. When you look at NC State, they've had a couple players enter the portal now. One thing I am curious to see is Dontrez Styles, the former UNC player who literally just entered the portal this postseason, this offseason. What does he decide to do? Kevin Keatts and that NC State organization, they pursued him hard. He's a young man out of Kinston. So he would be, I think, a really good fit for the NC State system. It sounds like there's some smoke there, but still a lot of decisions have to be made. And I have to imagine those decisions have to be made sooner rather than later if you're one of these players.
Lewis, personally, I'm a little bit petty, right? And so with the transfer portal, I can't help but wonder, all the players we just mentioned, you'd imagine that they would have another Power 5 Division I school to transfer to. But I can't help but wonder of, oh, I want to test the waters for the transfer portal. And then I want to come back to the very same school that I want to transfer from. And I say this because UNC has 5 players now that have decided to enter the transfer portal. I can't help but wonder, would any of those players, after saying, hey, I want to test the waters to see what else is out there, would any of them want to come back from Chapel Hill, or would that opportunity even exist? I can't help but wonder those things.
So that's the question. And I think that's something that we just, as people on the outside, kind of take for granted a little bit. Just because a player enters the transfer portal doesn't necessarily mean it's the player's decision. It could be that the coach has just kind of told them, hey, there's not going to be any more room for you here. Do what you got to do. So I think whether or not anyone would decide to actually come back, I think the big question is there a spot available for them? If I'm UNC, if I'm a UNC fan, I'm not really holding my breath for anyone to come back after entering the transfer portal, because we talked about it so much after the disappointing year. They're going to have to reshape what that entire team looks like, and it starts with these moves and finding out who's going to be there.
Lewis, let me ask you this. What should Caleb Love do? Should he come back? Should he transfer? Should he go pro? I personally would say, hey, go pro, go try to make your money, because I see 16 points per game clip, but you're also competing for shots with Armando Bacot, RJ Davis and company. I would go pro, but what do you think he ends up doing? And then what should he do?
I personally, if I'm Caleb Love, I'm thinking about going pro, because I think he would gain more from going pro, I think, versus just transferring to a different program. Unless, of course, he's able to go to a program that was be the ultimate fit for him. But really with Caleb Love, I think it's just about developing the outside shot more, being more consistent with it. Some of the, I think, just decision-making as a guard, a little bit more work, a little work on the defensive end. I think if Caleb can go to a coaching staff, whether that be professionally, in the NBA, in the G League, maybe somewhere else, who can really work on those tiny things with him, I think that would go a long way. But my gut says go pro. But I'm also not, an athlete who has that option. I wish I did. I wish I could go pro and go make a couple $1 million. That'd be pretty dope. I would like that.
Absolutely.
What about you, Mark? What do you think?
We'll take a slice. I would go pro if I were him, but whatever he ends up doing, Tar Heels fans should thank Caleb Love for this reason. He ended Coach K's career.
Yeah.
He had to make the shot to end Coach K's career in the Final Four. So as disappointing as this past season was, you got Duke twice. At the end of the regular season, K's final regular season game in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And in the Final Four, the first time the teams ever met in the tournament, and it's in the Final Four, and you end a legend's career after 42 seasons. However you feel about this past seasons, that's got to be the moment Tar Heels fans remember, is the shot that he made in the Final Four to end Coach K's career. Just to put all of this in perspective for you, Lewis.
That plus the, even the moments like against UCLA, for example, there were so many games in that run last year that UNC does not win if Caleb Love does not go nuclear. And so it was huge, but that's kind of his style. He takes those shots. He takes a lot of them. So you either die and be a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I think that's kind of the mentality maybe with no, seriously, it's I wonder what would have happened if Caleb Love decided to enter the draft or go pro last year, before this past season. That would be interesting to me. But if the market's there for you to go pro, go pro. That's what I would do if I'm Caleb Love.
I agree. One final thought too. When he's making those big time plays, and I think about a lot of the memories that the students have, and ultimately it would be memories they'll remember for the rest of their life, Lewis. But just how crazy Franklin Street is. And I know this because we live stream it on WRAL.com after the Battle of the Blues. Just what a great and transcendent moment that is. So again, as disappointing as this season was, the year before, you got to give Caleb Love his flowers, regardless of what decision he ends up coming to. He's someone that should be, I think, remembered favorably, regardless of what he ends up deciding to do.
I think that's fair. So let's go ahead and go now from Final Four last year to Final Four this year. You have what a tournament it has been on both the men's and women's side, but with the men's side in particular, the first time in the history of the NCAA tournament, or at least since they started doing seeding, that there is no 1, 2, or 3 seed in the Final Four. Instead, you have 4 seed UConn, you have 5 seed Miami, you have 5 seed San Diego State, and you have 9 seed Florida Atlantic. Mark, before we talk about who's going to win it all, what are your thoughts just when you hear that, when you saw how all of this unfolded?
The only way you could have predicted any of these teams really making the Final Four, I mean, maybe UConn, would be if you're a fan of said team. Like, even in your wildest dreams, if you're an FAU Owls fan, would you say, oh, we're going to go on a Final Four run this year?
Yeah.
You know, it's a team on the football side. Lane Kiffin was coaching it. He brought some notoriety to the program. The FAU Owls is a 9 seed. Like, huh? What?
I think,
and here's the thing, too. Go ahead, Lewis. Hop in.
Yeah, ESPN knocked, they put out a graphic, I think yesterday, saying of the 20 million brackets that people put in their bracket challenge, 37 correctly predicted this Final Four, which is crazy. Like, I mean, because you're absolutely right. Like, it's one thing to predict one of those teams getting in, but to put all of them together, it's bonkers. In my bracket, I will say I had both San Diego State and UConn. I'm just going to go out and say that. But when I put together that bracket, I was like, I hate this. There's no way this is going to happen. But I understand if you pick UConn, but everyone else, that is, congrats if you did it.
It's UConn's tournament to lose, Lewis. And to me, as long as the Huskies don't beat themselves, they're going to win this tournament. In my opinion, could be dead wrong, but they absolutely smoked Gonzaga by 28 points. Like, everyone was saying going into that game, well, Gonzaga survived UCLA in a great Sweet 16 game. They're saying whoever wins this game is going to win the tournament. Like, I could make the case for some of the other teams. I personally just think this is going to be UConn's year. Dan Hurley's bunch is just playing great basketball right now, and at the right time too. And Lewis, I know you did a segment too on WRAL about your KenPom ranking. So if UConn ends up winning, that stat that you mentioned before the start of the tournament will hold true. They're the last team in those offensive and defensive efficiency rankings.
Yeah, for those of you who didn't see it. So essentially every year since 2002 when KenPom started, the team that has won the national championship has had an offensive and defensive efficiency ranking. So offensive and defensive efficiency is points per 100 possessions and then scaled to opponents, essentially. So the combined ranking has to be less than 50. So if you are like the 10th offensive ranking in terms of offensive efficiency in the country, and then the 20th defensive, like your sum is 30. So yes, you're able to do that. That has been the case every single year. And the only team of that bunch that remains is UConn. So that's what's really interesting. We talk a lot about the metrics and everything and how all of that works. Sometimes you feel like they're kind of given too much credit when you see what happened to the Big Ten, when you see what happened to, the other Mountain West teams that lost earlier this year. When you see how little respect the ACC was given. But the KenPom rankings are pretty on once again this year, just in general. Like, even Florida Atlantic, I know people are like, oh, wow, where'd Florida Atlantic come from? They were very highly ranked in the KenPom rankings. I think they were like top 25. So it's like, they've won 34 games this year. So like, they're a very good team. They're not necessarily an underdog, but and same with San Diego State, one of the better defensive teams in the country. The way you get into a rock fight where they're just constantly just chucking boulders at you, making you just hurt all over. I don't know. It's interesting to me. I do think UConn is ultimately going to be the crew that walks away with it, just because of what they're capable of, the way they attack the boards. They're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country, a very good defensive rebounding team. They shoot well. They play solid defense. For me, I think the one thing that could prevent UConn from winning is turnovers. They do turn over the ball a little bit, getting up there that 18, 19, 20% turnovers per possession, percentage. So that would be something to keep an eye out for if Miami can force a bunch of turnovers. But I don't know what it is. You go back to, was it 2011? I think with when Kemba Walker came through. I think it was 2014 when Shabazz Napier came through. There's just something about UConn and being like, oh, is this bracket really weak right now? Are there a bunch of like low seeded teams? We'll take that. Thank you very much. they just win championships, man. It's so wild.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Calhoun era, Ben Gordon and Ray Allen and Emeka Okafor right back in the day. I'll make the case for San Diego State, Lewis. I do think it'll be UConn as well. And as the defense, and I go back to, earlier in the tournament, you hold Brandon Miller, the star player out of Alabama, to 3 of 19 shooting. Charleston, which, they play in the Colonial Athletic Association. You say, Mark, why do we care about this? They're the nation's best offense this year. And again, San Diego State holds them in check defensively. So that would be the case that I'd make, is San Diego State defensively. If they can continue to play at that elite level defense, that would be the case I would make. But like, it was crazy even going into Elite Eight, into the Final Four, where you're looking at the side of the bracket where it's like, okay, it's either going to be like San Diego State, Creighton, FAU, or Kansas State making the national title game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been a crazy, crazy tournament.
Yeah. I think when I go back to UConn, I agree. Like, that Florida Atlantic San Diego State game, I know it's going to be like the early tip and people are like, womp womp. Yeah, I'm not excited about this, but I think it's going to be super interesting regardless, because just the styles of play clashing. But I do think, assuming UConn beats Miami, and people have been assuming that Miami is going to lose for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people thought Texas was going to beat Miami over the weekend in the Elite Eight.
Miami should have lost to Drake in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I looked this up. With 4 minutes and 30 seconds left, Miami was down by 8 points to Drake. They then went on a 16-1 run to end the game. Like, we are that close to Miami not even making it past the first round. And instead, here they are, in the Final Four for the first time in program history. Larinaga is an absolute magician when it comes to making these types of deep runs. We saw him do it with George Mason, I think like 17 years ago, to the day almost. So I think ultimately, though, I think even if it's like San Diego State or Florida Atlantic, who can kind of, really get aggressive and athletic and big on you, I do think that, UConn is just, they're ready for a fight. Like if you try and, muck things up and, get UConn into a back alley and try and beat them up, they're going to come ready with some brass knuckles and get at you. So I think that's ultimately going to be the big thing for UConn. I think they have the strength and athleticism and fortitude to be able to really just steamroll whatever kind of style you play and adjust to it accordingly.
Yeah, Miami brought in a lot of its current roster with NIL money as well, which is very smart because it's like NIL money, warm weather in beautiful Coral Gables, Florida, Lewis. It's really effective strategy in terms of like, do you want to come play basketball in paradise? And here the Hurricanes are in the Final Four, which like at the start of the tournament, I know the ACC was a bit down this year, but it seemed like it was Duke that was the hot team going in. I wouldn't have predicted Miami in the Final Four ahead of a team like, say, a Duke I know the ACC was down this year, but I think FAU would be the longest. There's a reason why they're considered the long shot here, but like, this has just been such a crazy tournament. Again, I could make the case for any 4 of these teams. I think it'll be UConn. If not UConn, I would say maybe San Diego State, Lewis. Those would be my 2 picks. Yeah,
it's going to be fascinating for sure. I have all of these teams I feel like people have doubted at some point, but they just keep on punching it in the face. Really, Florida Atlantic, like their hardest game, I think, was round 1 against Memphis. Like, and then they've just kind of been doing their thing ever since. Miami, they steamrolled Houston, who was one of the best teams in the country all year long, and they just took the air right out of them and just pushed through. Isaiah Wong, that guard play for Miami has been truly phenomenal. I think we always go back to the tournament and say, guard play is always so big in the tournament, but it's kind of been the case. Like they've been shooting lights out. You need a baller who can go and hit some of these crazy, fadeaways, like, driving to the basket and just not care and not have any fear in his heart. And that's what Isaiah Wong brings to the team for Miami. So I don't know. I think UConn for sure. But it's going to be a fun Final Four, even if we don't have any of the top 3 seeds or any of the, blue blood programs or anything like that.
Yeah, and shout out to Isaiah Wong, the ACC Player of the Year, Lewis. One final thought I had, and we'll go on to our final topic. You mentioned the deficits that teams have played. FAU in the first round against Memphis, 10 minutes left in the game. They're down 7 points to come back and win. So it's just like time and time and time again, the Owls have faced deficits and they've found ways to win. And it's just like, how much can that Cinderella magic continue? We'll see into this weekend, Saturday, and then Monday night's title game as well, Lewis. So cannot wait for all of that. But it's a Final Four I don't think anyone could have predicted.
No. 37 people per ESPN. I don't know what that percentage
crazy.
is. I'll have to do the math really quick. That's out of 20 million, 37. Don't even get me started. Okay, we are recording this on March 27th, which is 1 month exactly before the NFL draft. The Carolina Panthers are on the clock. I think we're still pretty confident who they're going to, or at least we think we know who they're going to pick number 1, being CJ Stroud. Mark, do you still feel good about that for the Panthers?
Yeah, I think Stroud will be the guy, but the signing of Andy Dalton provides flexibility to where whoever you draft doesn't necessarily have to start day 1. The reason I say this, Anthony Richardson at the Combine a few weeks back absolutely tore it up, and it's his pro day this week. So we'll see what he can do yet again, where he's going to be very impressive because he's 240 plus and he moves like he's like 200 pounds flat. And so when you're running a 4.4, 440 and you're 240 pounds and you have the running ability, it's kind of like a guy named Cam Newton all the way back in the day. But really what it does in the modern NFL with a mobile quarterback is it holds defenses accountable playing 11 on 11 because you have to account for a quarterback's running ability. My point being, Lewis, I think Stroud will be the guy, but you can turn over all rocks and you can absolutely swing for the fences and draft the quarterback with the highest upside because you now have a veteran quarterback that can at least right the ship, whether that's, hey, we're going to have you as a backup to mentor this young rookie who's going to start right away, or if the rookie's not ready, you can start the red rifle week 1 of the 2023 season at quarterback and at least get competent to decent quarterback play.
Yeah, I think at this point it's like, I think it's tiers, right? I think CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, either one of those guys, I think will have success in the NFL. I do think sometimes the outliers, so like a Bryce Young and his height, that is a problem and something you definitely think about. Ultimately, though, I think, and this may sound wild because like you just look at what the Panthers have been like offensively for the past few years or so. I just really think that they have the potential to really have a nice like brain trust, if you will, of offensive masterminds in that building right now, whether it be Frank Reich, Jim Caldwell, Josh McCown. There are a lot of people to come in and mentor whoever the pick is. I still think it's going to be CJ Stroud. I think it just fits everything that they got going on. But let's move on from that first pick though, and instead look at what they do with the rest of the NFL draft, because they have, I believe, 5 more picks. They're going to have less because of the trades they made. Their next pick, I believe, is pick number 39. To me, it feels like at some point in time in the draft, you never want to be like, okay, second round, we're definitely going to pick this position. You want to be able to let the board come to you and go with that. But I do think that they need to get a wide receiver sooner rather than later, someone who can come in there and pair with Adam Thielen. And I'm curious, any idea, Mark, from you, is there someone who jumps off to you to be like, hey, Panthers, go get this guy?
Well, if you're going to go with CJ Stroud, you might have to trade up to get, say, a Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith-Njigba. But how about pairing 2 college teammates together? And we see this happen all the time in the NFL. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Alabama teammates. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, LSU teammates. That's a trend we're seeing consistently in the NFL. I would love to see the Panthers do the exact same thing because they had all the success in the world in college. And honestly, CJ Stroud might go to an NFL roster. Say the Panthers draft him. You could make the argument that his Ohio State receivers were more talented than the roster he would inherit if he gets drafted by the Panthers. And that's not a hyperbole either, Lewis.
No. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, were right there neck and neck competing for Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. I don't think they're going to be bad enough to get Marvin Harrison Jr. next year because I think he's going to be top 5 pick. If you can trade up Njigba. I mean, I think that would be a great if you can.
And
The Panthers have shown that they are willing to make moves in terms of trading up, and I mean, obviously with the first round pick, but also just during the course of the draft. I think though part of the reason why they are trading away DJ Moore is that they see a lot of potential with some of the second day picks at wide receiver, and then it just kind of depends on what they want, what kind of what they are looking for in terms of how it fits into their system. Like, I was just at UNC's pro day earlier, and Josh Downs ran, he did a bunch of receiver drills with Antoine Green and Drake May. He did some agility testing, things like that. Talk with some more teams. He actually he said that after the workout, he was going to have a meeting with the Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer was there, the new Cowboys offensive coordinator. But Downs, I think, is great, and he said that what he has been told is he's going to be a prospect that's going to get picked in the top 50. He's been told like he's looking around that 25 to 50 range, which would work for the Panthers. But then it just kind of becomes, okay, do you want the fit of Josh Downs? He does not like to be described as small. He said that earlier today. He is a shorter receiver. He officially measured in at about 5'9" at the pro day today. So, but he's explosive. He's fast. He's agile. He can be someone who can really come in there. So do you want him? Do you want someone who maybe is a little bit bigger, like a Jalen Hyatt type? I think Jalen Hyatt might be available when you have that second pick, kind of depending on how the first round falls. So you got top end speed there, really good agility. He's someone who is higher up in terms of prospects, and I think it'd be really interesting to pair him with and Adam Thielen. He's above 6 foot, so he's got a little more size than Josh Downs. I don't know. I think you just kind of keep on going down the list, and there are a lot of receivers that you can bring in on that day 2 with a second or third round pick. Maybe even get one there and then get one in day 3 and just kind of start beefing up that wide receiver room. Cedric Tillman at Tennessee is someone who I really like. He's got a lot of size that isn't as necessarily like top end speed fast, but has shown a capability. He's older, so if you want to shy away from that could be something to watch. Antoine Green, he
Speedster.
ran. Yeah, he's got some good speed on him. He said today one of the big things he wanted to prove with his route running is his ability to kind of move in and out of intermediate routes, get his shoulders nice and low, and work from there. So he looked great, and I think a lot of people were impressed with him. I think he's worth a flyer if you're the Panthers. It's interesting. You got to continue to beef up that offense and go for the best positions available. But once I get past that first round, if I'm the Panthers, I just want to go for the best players available.
Absolutely.
You have some holes, but just don't force yourself into getting someone. That's how I view it if I'm the Panthers.
Yeah, and you're going to have to fill the void left by DJ Moore now that he's a member of the Bears, Lewis. And the reason I mention the Ohio State receiver, is it Njigba Smith? The reason I mention him, I know he had like a hamstring injury. So my point being is that could potentially force him to fall later in the draft than he normally otherwise would. You mentioned Josh Downs and a potential pairing with the Panthers as well. I would love the trash talk, friendly trash talk between teammates, because you'd have Downs, who's the UNC receiver, and then last year's first round pick, Ike Ekwonu, along the offensive line. There could be some fun shenanigans in the locker room talking of which triangle team is superior if the Panthers do in fact, if they do in fact draft Josh Downs. And Downs, back-to-back seasons, high level of production with 2 different quarterbacks too. You had obviously Drake May this past season and Sam Howell, who has started an NFL game. Like that is an incredible feat to be able to do that as a rookie in this league. So having high production back-to-back years when defenses are keying in on you and still being able to get it done. One final thought I had to Antoine Green. I don't always look at collegiate production because it doesn't always translate to the league. But when I see his the length of each average reception when he's getting about 20 yards per catch, it's like 2 first downs every time he catches the ball on average. That goes a long way to be able to move the sticks, move the ball down the field in the league. That's something that stuck out to me with Antoine Green this past season for the Tar Heels as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for the Panthers because essentially because you traded up and you've gotten rid of some draft picks this year, next year, you just kind of put yourself in a position where you have to make every draft pick count. It's going to
Yep.
be harder to a miss in the NFL draft is going to impact you more this year than it would have in years past. So just you got to keep on hoping you draft well if you're a Panthers fan and see what you can do to surround that number one pick, presumably C.J. Stroud. He is the betting favorite still. Surround him with weapons, with a good defense and things like that to make a run at the NFC South. Because ultimately, I do think that's what this is all leading to, is the Panthers can make a run at the a weak NFC South division, try and win that division this year.
Yeah, 139, 93, 114, 132, and 145. Those are all the Panthers picks this season. So you trade a lot of them away, but if they strike gold and get the right quarterback, Lewis, I don't think any of that will matter. And that's the premium that you have to pay for the quarterback position in this league. So that's what everyone's going to focus on. And listen, I already know, what are you, a men's medium? We can start printing out the CJ Stroud jerseys now, Lewis. We can start getting them ready now.
I wish I was a men's medium, Mark. I appreciate where your mind's at, though. Thank you. No, I think it's the right fit. It's the right fit. But regardless, that is going to do it for Triangle and Two today. With new episodes coming out every Monday at 5 o'clock. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on WRAL Sports Fan, all of that stuff. For Mark Bergin, I'm Luis Fernandez. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you later.